Hello and welcome back to the Villa Filler podcast. I'm here as always with my good friend Dan Wiseman. Don't let looks deceive you. I may look happy. That is because I've just seen Dan's dog. Uh, Aston Villa have just lost 2-1 to Go Ahead Eagles. And
Yeah.
we said we were going to, it's been a little while, mate. I've been a busy bee. We said we were going to do the podcast and I tried to talk myself out of it, didn't I? But here we are.
Yes, it's a shame, mate. It's a shame, and as you and I just pointed out, we are the harbingers of doom, mate. It's no surprise that Villa have been on some run since we last spoke. Two really, really good results, sandwiched in either side of the international break. It felt like things were looking up ahead of two really, really big games in the league. Villa have made the news in more ways than one, shall we say, in the time that we're off. A little bit of controversy around our next Europa League fixture was could have been nicely kind of swept under the rug with a win today, but it's a shame. Like I'm not all doom and gloom. Like I think it's more a bump in the road and an unexpected the bump in the road, but these things happen when you play away in European competition. I don't think it knocks us off our stride too much ahead of two really, really big games in the league. And it's a shame, really, because you kind of felt that those games are the yardstick, really, for how good are Villa. What did this recent uptick in form really mean? This would have been, had we won today, it would have been six in a row in all competitions. Some really, really big away wins, particularly during that time, away at Feyenoord. Obviously, you were there for that one, mate. And then the win at Spurs. And so to go into particularly a home game against City and then the game against Liverpool, who aren't the Liverpool of, geez, even a few months ago, was a really,
Yeah.
really nice moment for Villa to be like, right, where do we sit? How good are we? These two sides, top sides, both in title intention, but not indestructible sides, not the sides that we've seen them become the juggernauts that they've both respectively been in recent years, was a really, really nice moment. And like particularly welcoming City to Villa Park and then going away to Anfield, just huge, really, really nicely timed fixtures. And so it's a shame that we've not been able to, just for a kind of momentum thing, just keep this going. I don't think this will knock confidence too much. It was obviously a heavily changed 11, terrible conditions, a really, really raucous and like vociferous crowd there. Like anytime the ball went out for a throw or anything like that, you could see like the abuse that was just being like hurled at the players was pretty crazy. And so yeah, it's a bump in the road. It's a bit of a knock, but I'm not, and this might come back to bite me, but I'm not reading too much into it. Don't know about you, mate.
Yeah, I think it's more of a case here, mate, that I think we've actually got what we deserved out of this game, which, as frustrating as it is, if you're not gonna put away those early chances that you create, I'm thinking the guess and cross to Watkins, he's like 10 yards out, puts it straight at the keeper. You've then also got Gesand who's one on one again. Uh, you would like to think that Villa would do better there, and it is potentially a bit of a different game. It's kind of saying in our WhatsApp chats before that the first like 25 minutes, I was like, this like terrible. Like this is I actually said, and I'm ashamed to have said it. I was like, this is a 5-0 up. Like we get one, we get five. Like it felt like they were there for the taking, but then they've obviously ended up going into the game and uh, I think the big sort of the shift in momentum came with that tackle on Lamar. That was the moment where it actually switched for me, mate. And I thought, oh, we're in a game here. And I can see you trying to talk, but you muted yourself, mate.
There we are. Good on Zoom. Good on Zoom. We are back,
We're
baby.
so back. We're so back. But yeah, up until that point, we were dominating, and
Yeah.
but what were we really do? We weren't necessarily imposing ourselves on this game in the way that Go Ahead Eagles then did from that moment on with that big tackle on the Mar, which I think it was Nauber. He ended up coming off injured. Also, he looked about 40. He looked like somebody you'd play like in Sunday League against.
It's we've done everything we need. You get the early goal. You can see like, and look, I love. There's a part of me that loves playing these sides in Europe because you see how much it means to them, and the kind of the stories that the guys on commentary were retelling about just like little knickknacks that they'd seen in the press room from their game against Panathinaikos that have been stuck up and framed and stuff like that. And it is lovely. This is a bit of these guys aren't necessarily minnows, but in the context of we've just been to the very same country and played Feyenoord, like it's a very different caliber of opposition that are really, really relishing, and rightly so. There's opportunities to play this kind of big Premier League side, and welcome the likes, Daniel Marlin and Ian Matson and Lamar Bogard, like back to the country, and then you've got Jadon Sancho and big name players like that, Ollie Watkins, Emi Martinez in goal. And you get off and running, and it's Evan Gasson's first goal for the club. It's not one for the scrapbook. It's not one where we retell into the grandkids, but you get ahead, you calm the nerves, and you think, right, we're on the right path here, given how we've been playing. And the stats will tell you we did everything we needed to. 15 shots to their 5, 7 on target to their 3, 65% possession. 554 passes to their 191. We've had 10 corners, they've had 1. We had a penalty. We've done all of this stuff. But it is really, really interesting. We concede the 42nd minute. We're edging towards halftime. We concede. Do think that, coming out into the second half, know that we've been paid back. We had it all to do again. The conditions just got worse and worse. And it just, kind of felt like we lacked that cutting edge that maybe we did just a few games ago. And, whilst, as I said at the top of the pod, mate, like I'm not saying that, we've taken 2 steps back here or anything like that. And, we're back to kind of square one in terms of the team's mentality and confidence. But in terms of how easy it was to get the ball into Ollie, how able were we to get in behind the back line, what we were able to do to kind of cut this defense open. They were very tactically well drilled, they were very well put together, and we did find it difficult. And as I said, you go through the game, and slowly but surely, as you bring substitutes on, the team returns to what would resemble perhaps the team we'll put out on Sunday. But it is a very different looking Villa team that kind of started this game, and don't get me wrong, had more than enough to get the job done. But Lindelof coming in at right back, and you kind of have this very interesting Sancho, Buendia, Watkins, and Gesson. It was an experimental team, and I'm not going to give in any criticism for that, because if it isn't, go ahead, Eagles in the Europa League, where you can shuffle around and put some fresh legs out there. And when can you really? And I don't even think we necessarily paid the price for it, but we didn't really have the kind of this team and the amount of new players that we had and how look it was meant to. We didn't really have those relationships and those kind of telepathic things to play 1-2s and carve this team open. It did look like a team trying to figure it out on the fly, and ultimately we just couldn't get it done.
Yeah, it's now I don't want to make this a thing when it might not be, but like away from home in Europe, we've not been particularly good. And I'm talking Europe as a whole here. I'm talking, from Conference League to Champions League, even to now. So I was incredibly surprised when a couple of weeks back, when we was at De Kuip, that we'd actually managed to win that game.
Yeah.
Because the atmosphere was raucous. It's, it's a huge stadium. There's the sort of the weight of 1982 that is, sort of bestowed on the shoulders due to the occasion. So like that felt like a big win and a big turning point. Been fortunate enough to go to like a handful of these games throughout all of the competitions, mate. And that's the first game that I've seen us win. I've done all of these games. We went to Poland. We didn't win. We went to Lille. We won on penalties, but we didn't win the game. We've done Amsterdam 0-0 to Ajax. God, what a boring game that was. We've done, who else? We've done Club Bruges. We lose to Club Bruges. And then there's, I can't remember which are the ones now, but like, obviously we won game as well. Olympiacos, that's the one. Olympiacos, dead men walking with that one. We were never going to win that one. But so many. Obviously, there's the big like there's the big win at Alkmaar, and obviously we won at Feyenoord, and we've won at Young Boy, and there are these, there are obviously occasions where we've won and we've won big as well. But it kind of seems weird to even suggest it, mate. But to go to a 10,000 seat stadium, go ahead Eagles, first time playing an English team, it still feels like it's something that we're getting used to, is playing these European games. And I'm not saying that as an excuse, because it isn't an excuse at this point, or it shouldn't be. It's more of an observation. It's like, well, we should have enough to sort of get us over the line here. And it did kind of feel like with that Feyenoord win and performance as well, that there was a lot more grit that I just don't think was on display tonight, mate. Again, maybe I'm looking into that, but it's certain, you don't win 4 Europa Leagues without, playing without any sort of fear or hesitation. And Emery will know that. And that's kind of why I think the lineup's a little bit of an interesting one. There's no Elliot, which, that seems to be a thing. When you look at, okay, obviously that lineup should have got the job done. There is no excusing that. But when you look at it, it's like, okay, Onana, like playing him back into fitness. Watkins, Sancho, like, okay, I think Sancho was okay in the game. I didn't necessarily think he had a bad game. Gesand again, somebody who, you and I both like, mate, but I don't know. I just think I look at Lindelof as well. Obviously, he's played for Manchester United, so there's no excuse for crumbling under the pressure there. But I just sort of look at that team, and it didn't seem to rise to the occasion. Emmy as well. I mean, like for both of the guys, like, and it has to be said, mate. They were two like pretty good goals that the go ahead had scored, and whilst they were certainly poor from a defensive point of view from Villa, we could definitely have defended them better. I think they took them both very well. Like the second one though, for Martinez, like there's a chance of getting beaten there. You have to spread yourself and make yourself big. It kind of feels like he went down, but he didn't make himself big. And I feel like we've had this conversation about the aura of Martinez, and I don't look at him in the same way anymore, mate. I was a bit surprised that Bezo didn't start.
Yeah, me too, especially when you kind of consider everything we were saying about the lineup. I think very much with the second goal, the type of save he tries to make dictates the finish.
Yeah.
And the commentary team were very full of the finish, and rightly so. It's a fullback that got all the way up to, I think it's their right back that gets all the way up the pitch. And, but because of the way Martinez goes down, he actually makes that finish, the decision to choose that particular finish, pretty easy. It's very much choreographs the way that he goes down, and just leaves the ability for the player to just kind of take the touch, let it bounce, and then lift it over the top of him. I didn't think it was particularly great goalkeeping. No, I agree that there's more than enough out there to get the job done. There are still positives. I thought Rodgers came on and again looked good. There's that really nice moment where he takes that step over, cuts in on his left foot, tries to bend one within the far post, and you're starting to see him find his mojo again. There's that cross accidental shot that hit the outside of the post and stuff like that. With every game, he seems to be returning to a better place, the place where he was probably this time last year. In truth, and so there's still positives. We have. Obviously, we'll kind of get onto the penalty miss, but just before that, there's a ball. I can't remember. I think it might be Matson, maybe, who puts it across the face of goal. I think it gets the deflection, but it's Pau Torres coming in at the back stick that, I think that's a striker, sticks a leg out there, and Pau was within reach of it, but just hasn't got the instinct that he needs to kind of, just throw himself at it essentially and bundle it over the line. If it was a Watkins, a Marlon, someone like that, maybe it's a different story. But it's all woulda, coulda, shoulda ultimately. When you're playing a team that setting fireworks off 5 minutes before the end of time, the kind of occasion, with how when they get that second goal, they are just doing everything within their power to make it hard. And, they have executed to a T, I imagine, the game plan, what they set out to go and do. Even with conceding early, they've managed to stay resilient. They've stayed compact. They didn't lose their heads. They didn't allow this to become the 4-5-0 that both of you and I probably preempted that it would be at that point. They did everything that was right, and they've kind of they get themselves back in it before half time, and then the onus is on us, really. The onus is on us to come out and make it happen, because they'd have taken a draw of that moment 100%. And it's a really, really nice ball. I think it's from Kramer, the centre back, just to put it over our back line. Not great defending, not great goalkeeping. Takes the touch, let it bounce, as I said, lift it over the top of him, and it's 2-1. And then we have the moments to get ourselves back into it. I don't think it's necessarily too costly a game, because you look at the games that we've got to play at home throughout the rest of our run, and they're not. It's not a gauntlet in the grand scheme of European football, I wouldn't say. Obviously, you have Maccabi Tel Aviv next week on the 6th. You've got Young Boys. You've got Salzburg at home, and in between that, you've got away games at Basel and at Fenerbahce. Those are quite tough, but I think when you look at the home games, you imagine that at Villa Park under the lights, I'd be surprised, put myself out on a limb and say, you'd be surprised if we dropped too many points there, to be honest with you. So I don't think there's really any doubt that we'll be playing knockout Europa League football come March.
I'm knocking on wood just in case.
Yeah, that's famous last words. Famous last words. But the more that you do now, the less pressure that you put on yourself in that crazy, January period where 2 games crop out of nowhere. You don't want to be going to Fenerbahce having to go and win to put yourself. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We saw the luxury last season of not being in the kind of qualification round as well, where you have that playoff to get into the round of 16. Going straight into that and avoiding, some of the great teams that were in the Champions League at that time, and setting yourself straight up for Club Brugge and the benefits that all that brought, and the ability to get ourselves into a quarter final. We need that again, really. And so I think we'll get there. I think the win against Bologna was really, really important. I think we'll look back and probably circle that one as, yeah, thank God we got that, because it probably allows us to go and get this result and not worry too much about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, on the penalty, finally, I don't really want to make it about Buendia, because I think he's been good, fine recently. It's a shame that he's missed, but it's more of a broader point. They pointed out on commentary that that's his second ever penalty, and the first one was 5 years ago. Do you know who he played for 5 years ago, mate? Norwich.
Yeah.
He's not taken a penalty since he was a Norwich player, right? So, and the reason I reference this, mate, is the keen listeners, the people who consume, all of the club content and the post-match interviews, and I believe it may have been a TNT interview after the Bologna game, in which we famously had a penalty that Ollie Watkins failed to score.
Yeah,
that was the 7th penalty in his career that he had managed to miss, or have saved, I should probably say. And John McGinn came out and, they'd sort of asked the question about the penalty and about Ollie, because Ollie wasn't necessarily in a great place at the time. And McGinn had mentioned that Daniel Marlon is our designated penalty taker. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, well, 2 things. First things first, Daniel had been on the pitch for 10 minutes in this game. So he was on the pitch at the time of the penalty and he didn't take it. Second of all, why is your designated penalty taker somebody who isn't a guaranteed starter?
Yeah.
Especially at this, obviously, since then, Daniel has lived up to both yours and I's expectations, mate, and has been starting and scoring goals. But it didn't make any sense. And again, Daniel Marlin's on the pitch here. He's on his home turf. Surely he wants to take that penalty. Why is Emi Buendia taking that? And it was a god-awful penalty as well. But are we cursed? Are we actually... We've not had a good penalty taker since Anwar El Ghazi.
Yeah, it's... I don't want to read too much into the decisions to let Buendia take the penalty, but my God, if there's ever a case for you look at a player's face before they take it, and my God, you didn't need to be a sports psychologist to know that there's no way this is hitting the back of the net. Literally stood over the ball with like a full-on grimace, like, the rains in his eyes, and he's like, he's like just exuding no confidence whatsoever. Just looked like in a world of pain, to be honest with you. You kind of there was no way he was ever going to score that. Don't you? Like, you see in penalty shootouts all the time. You read the face of the player walking up the step, and I think there has potentially never been a more clear-cut example than Emi Buendia in that moment. So Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's another player that we can strike off and say, no, he's not the man. When we get one next time, it will be interesting, and like you kind of get, when Yuri Tielemans is back and stuff like that, he's someone that we've seen step up and take penalties before and, be quite reliable. So, there's the elements of, it's not, I don't think the decision to let Buendia take it, sorry, is necessarily a bad one, nor something that, like, again, I don't want to read too much into, but it is interesting at the very least. It is interesting. Look, if he sticks it away, we never think anything of it. The decisions about Buendia take it, is bargains with bargains, right? But
Yeah.
it is interesting that, yeah, it isn't Marlon, but there's not, again, like, is he, it's right to play devil's advocate out of the two, out of Buendia and Marlon, like who's in the better frame of mind right now?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Given the goal that
I agree.
Buendia scored at Spurs, at least he's the more confident player, the more, I say, informed player. Marlon had his moments against Burnley, but that's 2 or 3 games ago now. So Buendia's got that mojo. He's got a couple of goals recently. He'll be feeling himself. It's not a bad pick on the surface, but yeah, as I said, like as soon as it cut to his face, standing over that ball with the rain in his eyes, I was just like, "There's no way this ball's hitting the back of the net."
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I mentioned El Ghazi, but obviously forgetting that we had Dougie, didn't we? But do you know what? He missed the most important penalty that was against
Yeah,
Olympiacos. So
yeah. So
maybe that takes him out of that. But obviously he had a pretty solid penalty record for Villa. Yeah, it's a shame, but there's no time for us to kind of sit and feel sorry for ourselves. We have to dust ourselves off. It's a massive, massive game on Sunday against a
yep,
fairly gettable Manchester City, or as gettable as they can be. The one thing that is for sure is, whilst they may not be at their very best, Erling Haaland absolutely is. And he scored, I think it's like in 12 consecutive games now for club and country. I think that's 22 goals in that time. That's going to be rough. That's going to be rough, and hopefully, I mean, it's Esri Konsa's birthday. Happy birthday, Esri. He obviously didn't play today. I kind of look at that back line, and I'm as great as Powell has been, and obviously we've not really spoken too much about him because we haven't had the opportunity to. But I think he's been really key in the sort of turnaround of form recently. But I do look at this game as and Haaland specifically as a Tyrone Mings problem, and he's the solution to that problem.
yep. Yeah, no, I agree, mate. I think when you look at the back line, like I don't want to get into this, but again, like these games are like you're just still waiting for Ian Matson to give you that extra
Yeah.
10. Do you know what I mean? Like players like him, like it's like you've got to be. It's really difficult to get into the back line at the moment, particularly when we're winning games. That's not something you want to be changing too much, and less so for Lindelof, but really for Matson, this is his opportunity to really put his foot down and make a statement, try and do, and it's just not happened. And I do think we'll go back to a more kind of familiar back line at the weekend. Digne will come back in. I imagine Cash comes back in, and as you say, it will be interesting to see exactly what the two centre halves look like. But I agree, the matchup wise, Pau Torres might not be the best fit. It is a really, really big game. It's one that I still, I'm not counting this out for. It's one that I still kind of fancy us for, and that, I think we can still, don't think a result is out of the question at all. And, I don't really factor this evening too much into my thinking there, to be honest with you. But it is going to be hard, but we've seen us rise to this occasion before. We've seen us rise to City before, but you kind of, where this result may come into things a little bit more, perhaps, is when, if we then say we lose to City, which is obviously entirely plausible, you then lose to Liverpool, again, entirely plausible. You then it's 3 defeats in a row, and that does kind of feel like back to square one. And you've then got a relatively kind run of fixtures with Bournemouth, Leeds, Young Boys, Wolves, and stuff before it picks up again when we play Arsenal at home. But yeah, you just don't want to get into the point where you're back to back 3 wins in like 3 defeats in a row. We really have to pick ourselves up and go for these 2 games, because equally, like, even a draw in this game could really put us back on track.
Amen. Amen. And we've got a fairly decent record at home against Manchester City in recent times as well. So, as you say, mate, it is not out of the question. But guys, let us know your thoughts on that match in the comment section down below. Let us know your thoughts on tonight's performance against Go Ahead Eagles as well. And yeah, we'll be back on Sunday evening after the Man City game, hopefully talking about another win. So yeah, like, comment, subscribe, and up the Villa.